This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
Yep. Okay, there we go.
And we are recording. Welcome, everyone. This is a meeting of the School Reuse Proposal Evaluation Committee. It is 3:52. We're going to start the meeting. We have a 5-item agenda. Debrief on developer interviews, review, discuss, and complete ranking of proposals, discuss letter of recommendation, vote on highest ranked proposal, and we also have public speak. Any members of the public that are on the call now or that join us during the committee's meeting, you will have 2 minutes for public speak at the end of this meeting. So I'm going to defer to Emily and Jeff and go to item number 1, debrief on developer interviews.
So just wanted to take this time to check in and see what you thought of the interviews. It is we have a couple of outstanding items on the score sheet, and one of them is the interviews. So I thought we'd start with that first, get a sense of your reaction first and have that chat, and then go back to our score sheet and actually score each of the developers on their interviews. And just as you do that, remember in terms of the criteria, not advantageous is respondent cannot clearly explain the proposal in the interview and is non-responsive to the evaluation committee's questions. Advantageous is respondent can clearly explain the proposal and responds adequately to the evaluation committee's questions. And then highly advantageous is respondent actively engages the evaluation committee around the proposal and the questions and demonstrates a clear ability to work with the city. So with that, I'll just open it up to all of your comments. I did listen in. I was in all 3 interviews. Obviously didn't show my face, but I was listening in, but I'm more interested to hear what you all say. You want to jump in first?
I'll jump in first. I thought all the interviews were pretty much on the same level. I thought they all did a very good job explaining their proposals. I really thought Wayfinders did a great job. However, because they only select one of the 3 sites, they're not going to score high ultimately. I would rate Wayfinders as an A, or and what's the term that goes with that, Emily?
Advantageous.
Advantageous.
Yep.
And the other 2 I thought were also advantageous. I thought they answered all of our questions, some more than others, but I thought they all did a good job on their presentation skills. Again, I was most impressed with Wayfinders because they passed the talking stick to kind of different people on their team. Mm-hmm. And I liked that about the NHP proposal. Arch Communities, not so much. We had basically 2 people talking with us, mm-hmm. the principal of the company and the 2 people from the architectural firm, Davis Square Architects. Overall, I thought they were all acceptable interviews.
I would just add that the criteria to think of that the difference between advantageous and highly advantageous is that demonstrating the flexibility, the ability to work with the city. So I know some of you had questions about could the respondent rethink some parts of their proposal or work with the city on parts of their proposal. So the highly advantageous speaks to that. So the other part, of course, is did you feel that you got, collectively for all of you, did you feel that you received the answers that you were looking for in addition to that level, or the flexibility and the response is on top of that, whether or not you received the answers you were looking for. Any others? Megan, Salem, Greg, anything at your end from what you saw and heard?
I'll go.
Yeah.
So as far as like the ranking, I felt like NHP, we specifically asked if they would be willing to rethink the gym. Mm-hmm. They said that they would be willing to rethink that, and that So I like the flexibility there. With Arch, we asked specifically about parking, and they said that they would be flexible with the city at the Maple School site to look at more options for public parking. I thought that was good. Another thing that came out from Arch was that they have experience reusing a community asset, the gym at the Elias Brookings School, and are currently, having that space being used as an asset to the community, which is huge. Right. I thought that was a really big kind of thing that was not necessarily highlighted in their proposal, but has a highly impactful, as far as I'm concerned. Shows their experience and their ability to do what we're asking to be done.
Megan or Greg, thoughts at your end?
Yeah, I thought they were all good interviews, and I thought, the end result from both of the interviews that included all three buildings, those were clearly the preference, I think, from my point of view and from what the community is looking for. I thought both of those would end up in a good spot. So I feel good about where we are in general. I feel like we're picking between two good choices. I feel like that's reassuring to say on the record. Mm-hmm. I did really think that the Arch Community's presentation and the way that they were able to figure out a way to include both the gym and the auditorium space and approach parking and have some flexibility on that. I thought that was a piece that for me pushed them really into the lead of like, this is someone who we could go into negotiations with and figure out what is going on here. But I didn't feel as hopeful about what NHP would be able to do with the gym. They seemed like they, in their model, had really thought carefully about if it could be saved. And financially, it just didn't work out in their model. So I thought that was an important takeaway from that. And that's sort of where I left off.
Greg, what about you?
I really liked all three. I mean, Wayfinder's proposal with taking down the existing building and only having the one school, it kind of, as great as their idea was and their vision for the property, it's just kind of a non-starter without having the other buildings involved. NHP's proposal also, excellent. It looks like they have some wonderful ideas and ways to use the space. And it's great that they had it at 100% affordable. I think the proposal from Arch Communities, with their ability to use the gym and, have shown an example, I think like Salem mentioned, that them having that Brookings School in Springfield and having done exactly what we're talking about doing and, having that experience and then experience developing buildings in town. I do like that they're working with a local contractor. I think it'll be, there'll be a lot of ownership with that and with their proposal. I do, we do have to rank things based on the scoring of the RFP. So I'm sensitive to that, but I think from my perspective, the proposal from March was the most kind of well-rounded that I think will give the city the best final product, if you will.
Mm-hmm. So far, Jeff, sorry.
Sorry, yeah, no, I just want to chime in too, because I was kind of going through mine and I had NHP, this is for the interview question. So I had NHP at advantageous, mm-hmm. and I had Arch at highly advantageous. And I think, initially I just went back and rewatched that part of the interview for NHP. And I kind of agree with what Megan was saying, is they said they would consider the gym, but it was going to be a significant financial issue that, may or may not happen because of that. So that the willingness to consider it was there, but they were already kind of, and they had a slide that kind of went up that showed how the gymnasium they had concluded that it wasn't that viable. So I do have some reservations about kind of that last phrase where their ability to work with the city might be constrained because of the financial, the pro forma. Whereas Arch, and the one thing that to add to Arch's highly advantageous score was that they did say, and during the interviews at least, that they could talk about removing the market rate and shifting the whole proposal to affordable. We can't consider that, but that did show some willingness to shift around some of the unit configurations, which I thought was more flexibility than we heard from NHP. So I kind of broke it down. I don't know if NHP deserves to go to not advantageous because they did answer the questions, but I definitely think Arch would get a higher score in my opinion on that one.
So with that right now, based on Michael's initial assessment, just so I could get the numbers in, I've got a yes on advantageous for all of them. Does the group want to switch that around based on what Jeff said, or based on what you think collectively? Do you want to make any changes to that?
I'm good with highly advantageous for Arch.
Okay.
Yeah, in terms of the interview question, I have no objection to that. They did perform well on the interview, having Arch rated at highly advantageous for the interview part of it. I have no objection to that. And I would keep NHP and Wayfinders at advantageous.
Yeah. Megan and Greg, are you in agreement? Does that make sense? Okay. So I'm going to go back now and we'll look at the categories we haven't scored yet, but I will just call out that I think in your conversation, and especially in what Jeff just said, you've kind of hit on the differential between these two. One is giving all affordable. As indicated, they might have some flexibility with the gym, but it would have some implications for their financials, probably because they're giving all affordable. One is giving some market rate, has indicated some flexibility on that market rate housing, but that market rate housing is probably what's offsetting the gym. So again, just thinking about community goals, I think we've got that dichotomy for this committee to work through as we continue. Michael?
You know, I'm curious. Do you think that, and this is just kind of a shot in the dark, do you think that the market rate units associated with Arch's proposal is the financial trade-off for using that gym for recreational purposes rather than developing it as units?
You know, as we look at the proposals, I would make that assumption. If that was something that we really wanted to evaluate, we'd have to go back into the pro formas and look at that in depth. And that's certainly something that either we could talk about, or the city council through their property committee, they could talk about that as well. But I just note that as being the two kind of major differences. Both proposals went for all three schools. There are some differences in the information that were provided as part of the proposal, but if you just whittle it down to those top two criteria in terms of the list, affordable housing versus retaining the pep and gym and the community amenities, the clear difference is it's market rate and gym on one side, all affordable, no gym on the other. So, in order to really break it down, we'd have to go into those pro forma statements. But I think on the face of it, that's worth all of us, or all of you rather, I'm here recording, all of you thinking a little bit further about. And it's not that there's a right answer one way or the other. There's not an absolute right answer that everybody in the world would agree on. It's what you feel about the community in terms of that split. And as I said, we've got a few more things to go into. So we did not rank, I'm just checking your agenda, Michael. So the next thing to go back to is ranking. We did not rank the pro formas, which was number 12. We left that blank because we were waiting to see what was submitted as part of the interview. And we had a little bit of a back and forth on the retaining pep and gym or auditorium. So I think we'll come back to that last. But right now, again, the three developer proposals came through in the interview with some more information. In terms of the pro forma, do you feel that you have enough information based on the interviews to now rank those? So currently all three are unranked.
Yeah, okay. I'll take a shot at this. I will say that both NHP and Wayfinders had those letters of commitment or letters of interest from the finance folks, the funding folks, banks, or I'm not sure if there were letters from DHCD, Low Income Housing Credits Program. but there were definitely some letters in there from financial concerns, banks or lending institutions. And I believe Wayfinders had those in there as well. Arch did not. That's the only part of the Arch proposal that was kind of lacking, were those commitments, commitments of interest, commitments of getting involved in this specific project from financial lenders and financial institutions.
And just as a reminder, actually, let me share my screen on this. It'll be easier for you to see at this point. Now, once you read out 3 rounds of advantageous versus not advantageous, they do sort of blur together.
Yeah.
No, this is the one we haven't, sorry. So there were 2. The financial status was the lenders, and we had ranked Arch not advantageous, and the other 2 highly advantageous. The pro formas is the line items matching commitments to community benefits, whether they do or don't. You may want to dive back into the proposals for this, but we had asked, or I think one of the questions that was asked prior to the interviews that they were to address was to talk a little bit about those community benefits. Now, all 3 of them did mention, and it's worth remembering that this is not something where the city is going to get a great deal of money from the development, because remember, the city has to be almost a partner with the developer and show a financial commitment to DHCD and the other lending agencies. That is part of the financial package that all 3 of them mentioned for the construction. But in terms of what this is about is, if a proposer says that they're going to provide parking or keep the gym or keep the auditorium or provide a playground, whatever those community benefits are, that the pro forma is reflecting those community benefits in it. So you know that there's a sum of money that is set aside to actually provide the benefits that were offered. So and we can take a moment or two. Actually, I don't have them open myself, so I can open them up. Yes, I saw a hand.
Was there one of the proposals we were going to check to see? I think that we thought that maybe the 40R numbers were off for what the match or what the state was going to give the city. Did we ever resolve that?
That $600,000 that was mentioned in is that the NHP proposal?
I think.
NHP,
yeah. And it was a good point that the city has already done a 40R project. Jeff, you might want to refresh my memory here, or the memory of the group. I think the $600,000 is a one-time fee. And then after that, you get $3,000 a unit, but you don't get that $600,000 a second time. Is that consistent with what you remember?
Yeah. And, I'll take a second to dive into this, but Arch, I think there was something in Arch's cover letter that threw you a little bit because you had to read it kind of twice, but they were acknowledging that as part of their former project, they generated $450,000 for the city, and that was just in the cover letter.
Yeah.
I'll drill down and look as we keep going. But I think the other thing I just want to throw out as we talk about this was in terms of the pro forma was the purchase price.
Yes.
And then I had notes that Arch in particular did propose, so they proposed a TIF or similar agreement, which implies that they will pay taxes, but they want to level them out over time. And what I recall of the discussion was that they would try to use that as the financial skin in the game rather than CPA. And so I had marked down that the purchase price was greater to cover the carrying costs, and then not accessing CPA is actually a benefit to the city because it allows us to use the CPA money for other projects. So I'll dig into the 40R, but I just wanted to throw that out there that I saw kind of those benefits as part of the pro forma too.
Right. So yeah, Arch had the higher purchase price. They weren't accessing the CPA, but they were looking for the TIF, which means that they would not be giving as much back to the city in taxes initially. It was kind of
during the term of that TIF agreement.
Exactly. And there's kind of no way to compare that because the TIF agreement has to be negotiated, right? So we don't know what that's going to be at this point. NHP came in with a lower purchase price of $500,000. They did want to access CPA funds, as I recall. I don't recall them looking for a TIF. Although I seem to think that we may have asked them that question, you may have asked them that question. And then Wayfinders was offering a purchase price of $1 for the single school. And I believe they were looking for CPA funds as well. I don't recall them looking for a TIF. So there you've got that balance. And unfortunately, with the proposals, you never quite get an apples to apples comparison with proposals. So it can be a little challenging sometimes. And did they, Michael and Jeff, did they send the PowerPoint presentations that they did? Are those on the website?
No, we actually did not receive the presentations.
Okay.
The recordings have been posted so people can watch the interviews and you can see the presentation from there, but I don't have the slideshows.
Okay. Any thoughts from anyone?
So sorry, it took me a minute. In NHP, I think they identify that there would be, the way the 40R incentive works is that if the city produces housing units, there will be we will get a payment per unit. And I think the going rate, last time we checked, it was $3,000 per unit. So I think that they're estimating that the city would receive $207,000, and it's not immediately channeled back to the project in any way. It's just revenue that the city would obtain. I would expect, as long as the Arch in particular uses the 40R, we would get a similar payment that would be comparable.
Yes, I would assume that would be true of both coming in. The difference in the amount would be by the difference in the number of units. So rather than the difference in the reimbursement. Yes, Salem.
So I guess if we're going to be ranking these, I guess the way I would rank it would be a highly advantageous for Arch because they have a higher offering price and they are going to, have another amenity for the city, which would be the gym. And then and they would pay the same amount of taxes as or we'd get the same amount of 40R return as another development that did the same amount of units. And then I think finally the TIF we can negotiate. So we know that there's going to be taxes and then those can be negotiated with the city. I think that's a good thing.
Okay. Yes. And just to confirm, the number of units I have for Arch is 61 and NHP is 69. So you'd have a difference of 8 times 3,000. So $24,000. In terms of the 40R. So it's not necessarily, you can decide whether or not you think that 24,000 is material given the overall amount of the project.
Well, and does that include the potential for the townhouses at Maple?
That does not include the potential for the townhouses at Maple. That's correct.
Yeah.
So you would be even less of a difference between the two if they included those. You might lose the parking though. So again, it becomes that balance and discussion.
Oh, sorry, Megan, go ahead. I didn't raise my hand.
No, it's fine. So are we still just looking at the pro forma?
Yes, we're just looking at the pro forma because we hadn't ranked that.
Okay. I guess my thought would be that they all, to me, seem highly advantageous at this point. I know that doesn't help differentiate between them, but I feel like we have enough information from all of them that I feel good about all of their information pro forma.
Okay. So in terms of, what they've promised versus what they said and the financials, you're comfortable that the financials meet up with their promises?
Well, now I don't want to say yes because
I think generally I could say yes.
Yes.
That's fine. I just have to keep you to the criteria.
Yeah. I mean, do you think any of the pro formas rise above to highly advantageous?
Well, that's what I was just going to answer, which is I think Arch does because they are offering 1.25. I think that's the
Well,
difference.
Well, again, we can't
Because-
consider a monetary price, a sale price for the schools as part of our evaluation.
I thought that was part of the pro forma.
It's part of the pro forma, but considering a purchase price is not an evaluation criteria.
Yeah, but it's part of the pro forma criteria.
It is. We can look at the
We can
pro
score it on
forma.
that.
We can look at the pro forma, but we can't say we're going to pick Arch because they're paying us.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying
$100.
if we're looking at the pro forma category and we're ranking them, this is a clear difference if we're including the sale price of the building.
We're not including the sale price of the building.
It's the community benefits.
And that doesn't include
the community benefits. It was the community
my
benefits.
mistake. I thought the sale price was part of the community benefit.
No, so when you look at 3, the definition of the community connections, it's the keeping the, and 2 would also be the community benefits, but it's the things that they have offered that are community benefits that are physical items. So,
Parking,
playground,
gym, auditorium.
Yeah, exactly.
Public meeting spaces.
Greg raised his hand, and then I have something to add to that. That's part of the conversation too, though. Greg.
All I wanted to add was that I thought Arch's willingness to make that contribution was kind of symbolic of their willingness to work with the city, and that they're interested in covering our costs of carrying the buildings while they work towards closing on them. Which,
yeah,
because there's going to be costs every year associated with hanging on to these properties until they're transferred to another entity.
Right. And I agree with Greg. I think I was more with Salem. So on pro forma, I saw it as broken down into 2 sections, 2 elements, which Emily, you're not. I think I totally agree that the first one was, I'll read it. Line items indicate significant support for the
direct financial benefit. Sorry,
I was just looking at the clause, which is the direct financial benefit, which I agree with Salem that purchase price is a direct financial benefit in that it covers the costs over the period of time that they need to gather all the rest of the financing. So I factor that in, and I'll just say that I ranked it as Arch as highly advantageous for this one, and NHP as advantageous. And I think the two differentials for me was that the TIF, would reduce some of our tax revenue, but it will not impact our CPA as great. And that's my contrast to NHP, which is clearly asking for $1 million from CPA, which is fine. We understand that, but it's less of a benefit to us because it takes away those funds. And then the last thing that didn't really come up yet was with the Arch proposal, they answered the question I thought pretty well, that they would be renovating the gym and then would seek I remember I didn't rewatch it, but I remember like a nominal lease agreement fee for the city to have access to the space, which I think acknowledges that they were going to renovate, which is a direct financial benefit, and the promise is to keep the space. And then we don't know what the nominal means, but it was acknowledged that we would be talking to them about some kind of lease agreement for the space. So that was how I differentiated between those two to get Arch at highly advantageous and NHP at just advantageous.
And Salem, my apologies, I forgot about the second half. So you're absolutely right on that.
I just thought I was wrong. It happens all the time.
No, I'd scrolled down, so I'm reading the first half. I didn't scroll down enough to see the second half the second time I looked at this. So yeah, that is correct. So based on what I've heard so far, I've got Arch as highly advantageous in the pro formas. I've got NHP as advantageous and Wayfinders as advantageous. So, okay. So let me just run through what I have for each, just so we can confirm each line, make sure I didn't miss anything, and then we'll look at the total scores at the end of that. So for affordable housing, I have Arch at not advantageous, NHP is highly advantageous, and Wayfinders is not advantageous. And that's because 2 of them had market rate. NHP was the only one that had all affordable. For a retained pep and gym and or auditorium/cafeteria for public use, I have Arch is highly advantageous, NHP is advantageous, and Wayfinders is not applicable because I don't have either. We could also put them down as not advantageous, but since they weren't even going to that building that we had agreed at the time, that didn't make sense. For 3, community connections, I won't read all the options, but Arch we have as highly advantageous, NHP is highly advantageous, and Wayfinders is highly advantageous because for each of the sites that the 3 were addressing, they were all they all had something that met those criteria. For responsive design, actually, you know what? We did not score responsive design. So responsive design is proposal does not consider, we were talking about this, but we didn't actually end up doing this. We're going to come back to it. Proposal does not consider either building or site in the context of the existing built environment. That's not advantageous. Proposal responds to the existing built environment and design of both building and site. And it is imaginative, highly advantageous, is imaginative in its response to the existing built environment in both design of both building and site. And this, because we're talking about site treatments as well as building, can apply to both new construction and rehabilitation. So what you're looking for is how did they look at the site and the buildings as well. So, for example, and I can safely say this, because none of the developers proposed this, had they decided to paint the building shocking pink with lime green stripes, that would not have been something that was responsive to the site, but it's something that can be done to either a building with new construction or a rehabilitated building, to see what I mean. Same thing, again, none of the 3 did this. Had they completely paved the site with asphalt, that would not be a responsive design. So again, it doesn't matter whether it is a existing building that's rehabbed or a new construction for this one.
I will say that nothing, neither the NHP proposal or the Arch proposal I found to be particularly creative or, wow, they're going to do something really interesting with these buildings. They are going to save them. They're going to all preserve architectural elements that are important to the Renaissance style of these buildings. But there's not like a huge, oh, wow. No one, I never had thought about that. Look at what they're treating the outside appearance like. I mean, nothing popped out to me as particularly creative, particularly innovative.
Salem?
So one of the things that stood out to me during the interviews, and I know that we're kind of done with that part, but when Arch started showing with their architect the other projects that they're finishing up right now, and I think one of them was like a 55 and over housing in Rhode Island. I did take note of the quality of fit and finish. So while the outside of the buildings, are probably going to be relatively similar, I would say the way that they integrated the architectural features in the projects that they've been doing recently, I thought was impressive. So I don't know if that counts for anything, but in their presentation, that stood out to me.
And just to your point, this is one of the reasons we're going back and looking at these is because the additional information you got in the interview might have changed some of your thinking on this. So it's appropriate to bring that forward, Salem. Others on the buildings, and then let's talk about the sites as well. But others on the buildings, Megan or Greg? Megan.
I feel like I have no way to judge imaginative versus just plain responsive. What I can say is I felt good about NHP's and Arch Community's approach to keeping hallways looking like hallways, using lockers as features in the building, replacing the windows accurately. Like I thought both of those were great. And I know that we can say that a new build can be responsive. I felt less good about Wayfinder's building in terms of this.
Okay.
Not that's highly advantageous or advantageous. I leave to the group, but that was how I thought about things.
All right, Greg, how about you?
I thought, they all did a really great job of trying to, work with the existing architecture and build it into, really transition it from schools to housing. So it's hard to say really whether one did better than the other. I mean, they were all really good. So it's definitely not the easiest thing to rank.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I was kind of.
They're all a lot more creative than I am.
I was giving them all highly advantageous for their approach, and I don't think I'm inclined to try to shift that around. But the one thing that was kind of occurring to me was where Arch did at least even consider adding a new structure and then offering the flexibility to include it or not include it in the rationale. Like that is something that was not in any other. Well, it wasn't. Yeah. I guess Wayfinders was imaginative because it was a whole new site, but they did take some time to at least think about that. I don't know that it changes my position on any of it because it doesn't take NHP down because they didn't do it, but it was something that was pretty imaginative, even though I don't know that the community would go for it because it's going to be kind of that back and forth between more units and parking, but I do think that was creative.
Let's talk a little bit about the site because I think between Arch and NHP, there was a difference in the site treatment, and I'm interested in your thoughts on this. And I'm talking about the Pepin Center site where there was the NHP had proposed that pedestrian connection between the two schools with the bollards for the emergency use. I think one of you had asked the question about talking with the neighbors in that. Obviously, the difference is that Arch did not propose that pedestrian connection. It's not to say that they couldn't, but in this proposal, they did not do that. And I'm interested if either one of those makes a difference to your score. Wayfinders obviously just had the one. Yes, Salem.
So Greg could probably answer this better than I can, but I feel like in order to close that section and put up ballards, the two houses that are in between wouldn't have access to their driveways anymore. So I don't know if it's creative, but I don't know if it's realistic. But I'll defer to Greg.
Fair point. Yes.
No, Salem, I think you're right. And I think there'd be some serious conversations with the fire department about limiting access through there. Because bollards are there, but they need to be removable. Even when the gate was there for the schools, the houses had access from one side or the other. But with NHP wanting to close it off for basically entirely pedestrian use, that access would be severely limited. So
let me just show this to you because it's not, and I don't want you all making a decision on something that's not completely accurate because it isn't entirely pedestrian use. You can see, if you zoom in on my side, you can see the pedestrian way that they've marked here in the brick, but they've left this Clark Avenue, this side open to where the those houses are, and the other side open to where this parking is. So it's just that component there. And again, how you feel about that is up to you. I just wanted to call out that for discussion.
Well, if you look at where the number 5 is on this picture, yeah. So that is an existing driveway.
That there. Yeah. Sorry. I also missed that too. So yeah, that would be the problem. I think it was the others.
Yeah. Right to the right of the 5 are 2 houses that would be contained within that pedestrian walkway.
Yes. I was thinking it was these 2 initially. Okay. So then that makes comment makes perfect sense now. Yep. I don't know why I missed those. Okay.
But it wouldn't be unlike what has been historically there, which is it would maybe be placement of that bollard system is really important. But when Pepin Center were operating as schools, that was pretty much there, and they opened the gate for buses and then closed the gate. So now unprecedented, where as long as those driveways retained access. I liked the thing I did like about NHP's site planning documents was they were a little more thorough. Not to latch onto parking, but in both properties they acknowledge our sort of observation of public parking. Even at Center, they list out 5 public parking spaces. I would hope that if we moved forward, that there could be some discussion about extending those. So there's a couple more, just bring that right down to the School Street, where we had envisioned the possibility for at least 10 parking spaces there. And I think they're very close. So I do like that about their site proposals, is that they really saw that, and that is a big thing.
Greg, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure everyone on the committee knew that the gate that was there, we were directed to remove that by the fire department. That wasn't in DPW to take out. Like that was the fire department said the schools aren't there anymore. The gate shouldn't be there. We need access through there. Take the gate out.
Okay, that's extremely helpful to know. All right, so let me just jump back to my scoring sheet here for you all. So right now I've got a blank unresponsive design for all of these. How would you like to score them? We've talked about advantageous for all. We've talked about highly advantageous for all. What we can obviously do a mix. What are your thoughts? Greg?
I would have to say like advantageous for wayfinders, because they did not want to they didn't propose to reuse the existing building.
Okay.
And I think that was something that was very important. That is very important to people, that the buildings get reused rather than torn down.
So advantageous in that once they decided to take it down, they did respond to it, but the fact that they took it down was not respond.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think it puts them a little behind the other proposers that took the step to really try to almost recycle what's there.
Okay, and so you would rank the other two both highly advantageous?
Yes.
Okay. Are you all, everyone else happy with that? Do you have other thoughts?
I can live with that.
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
I was trying to put a thumbs up. I didn't mean to raise my hand.
Okay.
Can you say that again? I got distracted. I distracted myself with something.
Highly advantageous for Arch and NHP, advantageous for wayfinders.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Thank you. I agree.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
And I saw the floating thumbs up, Salem. Thank you. All right, so we've done that. Environmental sustainability, which was the next one. We have Arch at highly advantageous, NHP at highly advantageous, and wayfinders at highly advantageous. Number of sites, obviously, wayfinders and NHP were both highly advantageous, and Arch and NHP were highly advantageous. Wayfinders was not advantageous. And then both Arch and NHP obviously scored highly advantageous for retaining the existing buildings. And wayfinders actually, because they score under new construction, so they don't get a score under that. The others don't get a score under new construction, so it actually washes out in that respect. Right now we have under control, not advantageous for all of them, because the proposal requires the city to maintain control of the properties for more than 18 months. I think they were both at 2 years. Correct. So, and that's just, I think construction times have increased even beyond what they were. I know when we were doing this in the committee, we went back and forth a little bit about the right timings. So I don't know that, I think with the supply chains and inflation and all of that, everybody's taking a little bit longer. In terms of experience, number 10, Arch, NHP, and Wayfinders all scored highly advantageous. Mm-hmm. In terms of financial status, this is where Arch Communities got dinged because they didn't provide those letters, so they got a not advantageous. NHP and Wayfinders both had the letters, so they were highly advantageous. Pro formas, just to confirm, highly advantageous for Arch, NHP advantageous, and Wayfinders advantageous. And interview, highly advantageous for Arch, advantageous for NHP, and advantageous for Wayfinders. Any changes? All right. Then I will give you the drum roll. Arch came in at a total of 30. NHP came in at a total of 31. And Wayfinders came in at 24. So now, having heard the rankings, seen the scores, anything else that you want to add to the discussion? I could talk about Salem, go ahead. Salem says, yeah.
Any ideas? You might get me going. Yeah, so I don't know where this factors in, but I feel like it should, which is A, Massachusetts based, B, Easthampton based. Taking those two things into consideration, I feel, and I don't know how this didn't make it into the criteria, because I feel like this is kind of a no-brainer. Shop local. If you are using a Massachusetts developer and you're using a city construction service, that to me seems like it's worth some points. So just putting it out there.
It didn't make it in because we were looking for the widest possible distribution of developers so that Easthampton could get the best response. So we didn't want to have developers feel that they would be at a disadvantage because they weren't from close to the area. And it worked, and that you did get a wide distribution. But certainly, this is the time for this committee to talk about if there's anything else. I would also encourage you to go back and look at the parts of the RFP that talk about the things that the committee was looking for. Greg,
just to speak to Arch's proposal. I mean, I think that their willingness to save the gym. Cover the city's cost of carrying the buildings for a few years while they, till they close on it, and the willingness to move to 100% affordable if it were to put them in a more advantageous, ranking. There's just something to be said. It's kind of echo what Salem said. I mean, I know it wasn't in the proposal, but I just think that there's ownership to that they want to, that they're really willing to work with the city and do what the city wants, the best, what's in the best interest of the people that live in Easthampton.
Okay, Megan?
As I'm looking back on some of the places where, because I agree, I think my choice would be Arch Communities. One of the places that hurt them is that financial status box. And I see like two pieces of that. So I guess this is more of a question for the group. There's are the letters there? Right? That was that's part of the criteria. But the second part of it, are the letters there that show expertise with these funding sources? And so we don't have the letters, but I think in their interview, they made it clear that they have extensive experience with funding sources and that financial expertise here. So I'm wondering if that's something where the letter component, having the letters in that initial proposal, is really required for us to select advantageous or highly advantageous, or if that could be reconsidered.
Okay. Greg, I'm just pulling the language while you talk.
Well, I think Salem said it in the first meeting. We can look out the window here and see their experience. Like looking at it right now. So that's all.
While you talk, let's see. While you talk, I just want to go back to their proposal and check one thing. So let me just quickly do that. Because although they didn't have the letters, and it did ask for the letters, it also asked for the sorry, let me pull up the right document. I've got multiple open, so I can tell you what I'm looking at. So I'm looking at the requirements and conditions of submission of proposal. And when we're asking for the references for completed projects, ongoing management, and financial status. So I just want to go back because I think they did give references for financial status, even though they didn't give letters. I want to confirm that that's correct. Salem, well, I'm looking, I see your hand up, so please go ahead.
I just wanted to, something that came up in the interviews for me again was the idea that Arch has within Easthampton a management team for a project like this already. And I felt like having that in place currently was advantageous for them compared to having to do it from the ground up as everybody else would have to do, because the Dye Works building is currently being managed and is currently, leased up and all that. And so I thought that was just another thing that it didn't seem like we talked about a lot, but they already have that structure in place. So.
So I want to, and I think that's a valuable thing to bring forward. I want to confirm that they do have listed permanent lender on multiple projects. This is on page 39 out of the proposal. And the equity investor and construction lender as a reference. And then I'm just checking my notes on the interview. I think one of the developers, and we might want to, I think it might have been Arch. Some of the funding was coming directly from them. But let me just check. I may have misremembered that. Okay, no, I misremembered that. That was something else. So apologies. So I'll open it back to you all, and Michael, obviously, procurement officer, Jeff, your thoughts on this, whether the fact that the references are listed, and I assume once the city is moving towards choosing a preferred developer, whichever choice the city council is making, they'll be moving forward to checking those references. But whether or not that this committee feels that is acceptable for number 11.
Michael, do you have any thoughts on that?
Not really. I think they're all known quantities.
Mm-hmm.
Arch Community is a successful project right across the street. We know Wayfinders has a successful project partnered with the Valley CDC over at Parsons Village. And we know NHP hasn't done a lot of work in Massachusetts, but they're certainly capable affordable housing developers.
So you could move, because the other two for financial status are already at highly advantageous, you could move Arch to either advantageous or highly advantageous, depending on your preference. That it is it is an and rather than an or, but they did give the bank references. And to your point, I think all three of them discussed in the interviews their familiarity with the banking sources. So I don't think you could ding either of those on that. So you might not go as far as a highly advantageous for Arch, but I could, I think that should this committee want to, they can make the case for advantageous.
Right. And if we went to advantageous, we would end up with a numerical tie, at least 31.
You would, yes.
I guess hypothetically that I'm interested in that discussion. I then went to the RFP again. So I know, Emily, you might be in the best position to I don't know if you have it, but on page 27 there are two sections that we've talked about this before, but the section D is the city's option, and then section E is like interviews and acceptance. So, the interviews and acceptance clause does say that one of the allowances, thank you so much for pulling that up. E there, it's really that last half sentence, which is to award contracts as it deems to be in the best interests. And then the paragraph before that in D, what I was just looking at is the middle of the sentence. So the city further reserves the right to waive any minor informality, which we discussed this at the first meeting, the determination of the criteria and the process by which proposals are evaluated, the decisions as to who shall receive a contract award and or whether or not an award shall be made as a result, this RFP shall be at the sole and absolute discretion of the city. So, we have adhered to the criteria very consciously, but I do wonder about what to do if we're in the numerical tie. Then I think the preferences kind of previously stated carry some more weight, which we decided also not to weight anything. But I think I didn't really never consider us to get in a numerical tie, and we need to be careful. But I do wonder, then does some of these final conclusions lean us in any particular direction? So Emily, or I don't know who else would chime in on this.
So I've got a couple of thoughts for you to consider. One is for people to look at pages 24 and 25 of the RFP, which are the development goals and objectives, and the note on the public-private partnerships. I think that would give you, and I can pull them up in a minute. I think that would give you some information to consider in terms of discussing how to, among this committee, break the tie to go to City Council. I will also just say congratulations. You have 2 proposals that you're very, very comfortable with. And I think that is a winning situation for the city of Easthampton. So, it means that you have a hard conversation for the rest of this meeting, but it's a great spot to be in to have 2 to choose from. So with that, I'm just going to present this up here so you all can see, and I'll zoom in as soon as it gets up and I can see what you're seeing. So this is the development goals and objectives at section 3, and all of the proposers should have reviewed this. So all of the respondents should have responded to the idea that housing is affordable at a variety of income levels and family sizes. We've seen that. That the neighborhood impact on the neighborhood in terms of design, traffic, and parking. We've talked about that. Integration of community amenities, encouraging the interaction between new residents in the neighborhood. And then just, again, calling out continued community use of the Pepin Gym and Auditorium, which is something that was very much a discussion, not just among the committee members of the committee members who developed the RFP, but obviously at City Council as well. Wayfinding signage program, which I don't think was really discussed, but is something that would come back once the development was moving into actual design phase instead of the conceptual phase. Safe pedestrian connections, didn't see any changes there. Design that's compatible with and responsive to the surrounding neighborhoods, which we talked about that. ADA and stretch energy code. Stretch energy code is required for Easthampton. And then use of the Sporty R smart growth. And then if we move on to the other page, which I'm going to have to zoom out and zoom back in again, talked about the development program for one or both sites, and then one or more buildings demolished, parking and affordability has to go up. And then I just wanted to come in here on infrastructure and also, again, the discussion of the adaptive reuse of the Pepin Gym or Auditorium. Apologies for making you dizzy here. So the idea that the city was so interested in the retention of the gym and the auditorium that it was part of a separate discussion within the RFP. So, and then what that would mean. Now, the one thing that we didn't get in the proposals so much, but did get in the interviews, was that discussion of what the impact would be if you either retained the gym and didn't have the affordable housing, or retained the affordable housing and didn't have the gym. And so one thing I'd point out is how comfortable, among this group, how comfortable you felt about the responses from the developers on those. So, Megan.
So as you were going through those, I think there's another spot where the way that not advantageous, advantageous, highly advantageous is structured, and the way RFP is written, I wonder, that's that affordable housing line. So, the not advantageous is essentially, are we having, higher priced units? And so that was definitely in the proposal for Arch Communities. But I can't remember if Salem or Greg brought it up, but they very clearly said in the interview that they would, go back to that and discuss again. So that, for me, I'm wondering, okay, so it wasn't in the proposal, it was in the interview. We're able to rescore based on the interviews. Does that mean they're up and out of that? And then the question I have about advantageous and highly advantageous is really the difference here is whether or not there are multiple family sizes or unit sizes. So I guess I'm thinking for both affordable housing and for financial status, if it makes sense to revise based on the interview for both of those.
So here is the language that you were pulling up, Megan, just to pull that out. And then I had in my spreadsheet, let me pull that up and make sure up so you can see it here. So I worked out the counts among the 3 proposals. I'm going to zoom in a second. I need to move this over so you can actually see what's on here when I zoom in. So I looked at the unit count by what was proposed. So Arch had a single studio. They had 31 one bedrooms to NHP's 28 one bedrooms, 15 two bedrooms to NHP's 22, and then NHP had 7 loft units. And then Arch Communities had 14 three bedrooms, and NHP had 12 three bedrooms. And remembering this isn't counting the potential for the townhouses on Maple Street. And then in terms of affordability, I broke it down so you could see it here. They both had 8 units at 30% AMI. The difference comes in here where NHP has the 16 units at 50% AMI. There's a 45 at 60 and a 28 at 60. And then we have 17 at the 80% AMI for NHP and 8 at the market for Arch Communities. So in terms of the question about whether or not there are enough units for that wide distribution of family sizes, it's the unit count that we want to be looking at. And then obviously the affordability, it's that distribution there. So hopefully this is, and I also did, the percentage of market down here. So Arch has 13 Wayfinders, although they're out of contention now, just so you know, they had 30%.
So and I think encouraging because we definitely have the wide variety of unit sizes.
Yeah.
And if we are able to revise the score based on what they said in the interview, then it's very reasonable that we could say, yes, Arch Communities as well as NHP, are willing to shift around that 80% of AMI and kind of meet the initial goals. In that case, I wonder if Arch Communities is actually highly advantageous as well as NHP on this, what is it called? Affordable housing.
On the affordable housing, yeah. So I just did quickly a percentage of the 3-bedroom units to the total units. So Arch is 23%, NHP is 17%. And that's really because NHP has more of the 2-bedroom units because of the loft units. So,
yeah, I have a thought here too. So, one of the things that we should be aware of, and if we do some of these adjustments that, we could, I think if we move the housing item to advantageous for Arch, and we previously talked about moving the financial status to advantageous, that generates a higher number in terms of the ranking. Mm-hmm. The one thing that I, would want us to be clear on, because we had briefly discussed like the memo, would be to be clear that we understand that we are talking about a difference of 8 units. So to accommodate because we have a wide range of goals we're trying to achieve, to get what the RFP asks for, we are looking at a trade-off of 8 units to save the gym. As long as we were, because we had previously talked about maybe like just doing some quick bullets as to describe the difference between the 3. I would want to be just real clear as we presented something to City Council that this proposal ranked the highest. That it is noteworthy that to accommodate the saving of the gym, it would be the difference of 8 units. That seems to be kind of what we're talking about. But I do see how looking at the range of units does change that first criteria in an important way.
Salem?
So I do agree with adjusting those 2 variables based on the points that have been made. I think that as we talk about that difference, Jeff, between the 8 units, I think 2 important pieces to note for the council as we kind of go through this is that doesn't include the potential for townhouses, and so it could be actually a shorter kind of distance between saving the gym and having as many units. So I think that's worth noting as well. But I do think that, making those 2 adjustments does make sense.
Yeah. So one of them was the financial, which we've already made. So that's what got us to this tie situation. If we change sorry, I'm reading as I'm talking, which is always a bad move. If we change affordable housing from not advantageous for Arch to advantageous based on the distribution of units, and the discussion into the interview that they would be willing to drop those market units. I'm not sure you could go to highly advantageous. On the other hand, numerically, you don't need to go to highly advantageous to break the tie. So, if you did that, then obviously Arch Communities gets an extra point and is scoring 32 instead of 31. So just to let you know. And I think, we know from NHP's proposal that they felt they could fit 7 units into the gym. So I would use that as my comparison, is that in order to save the gym, you lose 7 units. 8 is the difference between the two proposals, but it's 7 that fit into the gym. They're clearly doing a different distribution in other parts of the buildings to get to that. I did not do a unit or a building by building unit count, but I believe that NHP said it was 7 units, 7 loft units in the gym. So, Greg.
But 4 of those units are made up if they do build the townhouses, right?
I think that, was it 4 units for the townhouses? Yes. I didn't go back before this meeting and look at that number. So yeah, in that case, you've got a 4-unit difference between the two proposals, 7 units of which would have been in the gym. So, and it may be, I think it's important too, to just remember that these are conceptual designs. And once they get into the design phase, there may be more or fewer units. It may also be, again, once City Council has made their decision and the mayor and her team start the negotiations, again, there can be some movement potentially in the design process on units, but you want to be comfortable with what you're getting comparatively. Salem?
Yeah, so this might just be my lack of knowledge about this process. Since we have a broken tie, do we send along recommendations that would go along with our ranking? So, for example, saying we feel like, if Arch is in first place, we feel like Arch should address public parking. We feel like they could address the affordability and have all affordable units. We feel like they should address, building the townhouse, et cetera, et cetera. Like, are we going to pass along any of those kind of recommendations along with this just pure ranking? I guess that's my question.
Jeff, yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a good question, Sam. I wonder if we may not want to be so strong, but what we did glean was that in this case, like Arch expressed willingness to talk about the parking on Maple Street. And I think that would be an important message for council to know that they expressed the willingness to consider that. And I think along the same lines, the willingness to talk about converting the market rate units to affordable units. I think just more making city council aware that they acknowledge willingness to discuss that, I think might be a safer place for us to do that. But I do think those were the 2 things that I had on my list that Arch would just most likely need to talk about with city council, or city council is going to talk about those elements. But I think the larger element is resolved, which is the preservation of the gym. So I just wanted to chime in on that.
Megan?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think particularly like when we're showing what happened or explaining what happened when scores got adjusted during the interview, that I think that exactly is Jeff what you're saying. Like, no, the proposal did not have this in it. We asked about it in the interview. They presented it in the interview. They said they would move to this. That is why their ranking changed. Because, I think it sounds like the way the conversation is going, we all sort of really appreciated Arch Community's proposal. But I think, I can't remember if I said it in this group or in another group, but I say it all the time. Like, I'm always like, does this pass the sniff test? We're not sitting around here going like, what can we fudge around to like make this thing work? How do we want it to work? No, we're like, looking at what they said and what they did, and these are the actual numbers. I think that's important to just note in there as we send it off.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about the letter. Michael and Jeff and I had a quick conversation earlier just to talk about logistics after this meeting. So I get to draft a letter before tomorrow morning, or at least, before noon tomorrow morning, so that.
Yeah, you got till noon.
Yep, I know, I get the best jobs. So the idea is that what we're going to do is the letter is going to recommend the single one, and we'll confirm that in a minute, the single developer going forward, but we're going to attach a copy of the evaluation score sheet so they can see what they scored on. What I'd like to do is say something on the order of the evaluation community recommends developer X. This is the process that the evaluation committee went through. We had X number of meetings, we had the interviews, we ranked before the interviews, we reviewed the rankings in light of what we learned at the interviews. And then, here's the attached scorecard. And then as part of that, Jeff mentioned the bullet points earlier. So, it's the, we understand that the developer that we recommend, the development team that we've recommended are willing to grant flexibility on X, Y, and Z, and it is for this reason, or because they're offering this mix of units, or because they're saving the gym and doing this and doing that. These are the reasons that we're recommending them. And I think, Salem, that gets to those components that you want to make sure are memorialized, that you all heard in the interview where the flexibility is. And I think that would work. So, and then once I've written the letter, I'm sending it to Jeff and Michael. We're going to have the city attorney take a quick look at it just to make sure that, the wording gives the right sort of information to the city council about what they're doing next. And then my understanding is it will go to city council next week and be sent to property committee, and then come back from property committee to the city council sometime in May for a public hearing and a vote at that point. So. Yeah, Jeff, anything I forgot?
No, two things just I think would be good in the cover letter was perhaps all of the entities, but in particular the two that we've been discussing the most, both identify the importance of time to render a decision, because they would like to know if they know by May they have a series of things that need to happen in order to be eligible for that pre-application round, either of which would be aiming for. So that is important to articulate. And then I just wanted to, maybe it's a finer point on the way we're using the interview. I just wanted to be clear that I think what I thought we did with the affordable housing criteria, we're not relying on the hope that Arch will convert 8 to affordable, but we looked at their spread, and I think we looked at how their spread captures that goal, right? So it's a distribution of types of units, including 3 bedrooms. That, to me, that's what we looked at to change that ranking. Right. But then I think we'll put in the letter that they also express some willingness to additionally talk about the 8, right? So I just wanted to make sure that we're not changing that because they said they might do something. We looked at the spread of their configuration, right? That's what we had kind of talked about?
They were addressing the number of family units,
yes, right,
more comprehensively than we had evaluated last time.
Okay.
So those numbers came from the proposal, not the interview.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. All right, Michael, anything else from your end before this?
Salem has his, Salem, you have a question?
Okay. All right.
Okay. And no, nothing else from my end, I don't believe.
Okay, in that case, somebody should make a motion which gets seconded, and then we should, you all should have a vote.
I'll move to send the Arch proposal with 32 points to the full city council.
Okay.
Second.
Oh, Michael second.
Sorry, for the record, mine was second ? Not second period, just to make that clear. So, all right, I heard a second. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor?
I don't know if we need to do roll call because we're virtual, but that's what we normally have to do. But we
can do roll call just to make it official. That's true. Some people might be listening in on Sunset someday. Okay, let's do it alphabetically and see how awake I am. Jeff. We'll do it alphabetically by last name. Sorry, I forgot to say that.
Jeff Bagg, yes.
Okay. Salem.
Yes.
Megan,
Megan Harvey, yes.
Greg,
Yes.
and Michael.
Yes.
Okay, great. That is unanimous. Excellent. Salem.
Sorry. I just wanted to say how, appreciative I am of everybody pitching in on this process. I mean, the fact that we got these 3 awesome proposals, like, it still kind of blows my mind. And so, I just want to be so appreciative of everybody spending their time doing this, but also of the people that were willing to put all the time and effort into those proposals. Because I feel like all of those proposals were really good in their way. And so for me, this was a really kind of an enlightening process. So thanks, everybody. I appreciate it.
Okay, I think we are at the conclusion of our meeting, and I would like to offer public comment at this time. Is there any member of the public who is in attendance who would like to provide public comments to the evaluation committee?
Yeah, and I can look on the attendance list that there has been no one who attended this meeting.
Okay, very good. I don't think we'll have any takers then, and I move to adjourn.
All right.
Second. Yep.
All vote in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We'll adjourn,
Thank you.
folks.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you all for
Thank
your
you all.
time. I
It's been a
appreciate it.
pleasure.
If anyone has any follow-up questions, they can feel free to reach me. Jeff, Emily, we'll talk tomorrow.
Sounds good.
Sounds
Thanks,
great.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Have a great evening, folks.
Bye.
Thanks.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.